Welcome back, one and all, to the Our Outdoors portion of your weekend. I am your host, Nick Simonson, outdoors writer with my materials online at newsdakota.com and dakotaedge.com. September has arrived. Happy Labor Day weekend. It is the bookend for our summer, closing it out. And of course, with the arrival of this month come the rollout of many hunting seasons. Obviously, a couple underway already. We go back, we have the early management take for goose. We got the federally set dove opener that happened on the 1st of September, and of course, bow opener, which was last night, the afternoon of Friday. Boy, I'm seeing some pictures already coming in of folks finding some deer out there. So a lot of great stuff on the trail cameras and some field photos already hitting the web. So keep your eyes peeled for that stuff. We've got a lot of great hunting information up there at newsdakota.com where you can stay prepped and ready for what's to come, whether it's grouse on the 11th or looking forward to October and pheasant opener, and of course that firearms deer season as well. And on the latter, we'll be talking with Charlie Bahnson. He is the state wildlife veterinarian for the North Dakota Game and Fish Department, giving us some insight into CWD, which is a more long-term problem for our deer herds. We've seen chronic wasting disease have a severe impact on populations in Wisconsin, Saskatchewan, Wyoming, Colorado, and Game and Fish is taking proactive steps through a task force to help take the next steps to limit the expanse of that disease here in North Dakota. So some big information there as to what GNF is doing proactively to protect our deer herds. And secondly, we'll talk with Charlie about EHD, Episodic Hemorrhagic disease, which is midge-borne disease. We saw it last year. We're seeing it again. There's not much overlap with the affected area, but Charlie is seeing some reports come in around the area where it was most reported last year. It's kind of expanding eastward toward the river. So a lot of information for deer hunters out there to know what the health of the herd is and how to help protect it. Very important stuff. That's coming up right after this quick break. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hey, we are here in the start of the season for archery deer and a lot of other big game opportunities coming up. And then, of course, November, the gun season, and a lot of folks looking forward to their opportunities to get out there and chase those deer herds around North Dakota. And for that, we have Charlie Bahnson, wildlife veterinarian for the North Dakota Game and Fish Department, to talk all about some of the concerns that are out there on the landscape. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
It's good to have you on board when we're talking about the health of the state's deer herds, which have done quite well over the past few years. We've seen an increase in firearms tags, but the big concern that is out there on the landscape is chronic wasting disease. And we now have a task force in place, which you are helping out with to direct that forward. How is CWD looking at this point in time as we head into the 2021 deer season, and what are the areas of concern?
There's reason to be concerned. There's reason to be optimistic. Certainly since our first detection in 2009 down in Sioux County, we have a larger footprint affected by CWD now. We have 5 hunting units where we've detected CWD. Most of those hunting units, it's still extremely rare, but kind of in our first unit where we found it back in 2009, 3F2, we are starting to see a year-to-year increase in infection rates, and that is a cause for concern, certainly. Mule deer across the board, hunter harvested about 5%, are coming back positive now. 3 to 4 years ago, that was down about 1%. And unfortunately, we're kind of seeing this upward trend, which is a cause for concern. That being said, I said there's good and bad. The good is that the majority of the state is still free of CWD, and we hope to keep it that way as long as possible.
Yeah, and one of the great tools in doing that now is the creation of this CWD task force by the Game and Fish Department. What are the functions and goals of that task force?
At the turn of the century, across the country, we were starting to see kind of some alarming trends in other states. That was when things were starting to really light up in some Midwestern states to the east of us, seeing increasing rates. Our department put together sort of a contingency plan around CWD. Since that time, North Dakota has been added to the list of states that have CWD, of course. And we also have 20 years worth of new research and understanding in terms of how best to manage this. And so this task force is really set up in order to kind of reassess where we're at with the issue, assess how we can kind of fold in the best management practices to address it, and ultimately, among other things, come up with an updated CWD management plan. That'll manifest itself in a few different ways. We expect to kind of assess how we're directly managing the disease on the ground, but what has really emerged in the last decade is that key to managing CWD is hunter behavior. behavior. And as the department, how can we continue to get buy-in with people and various stakeholders and really shift hunter behavior to the best practices to lower the risk of CWD spread. So communication strategies, outreach strategies will probably be a pretty strong component of what we do moving forward.
We're talking with Charlie Bahnson, Wildlife Veterinarian, North Dakota Game and Fish Department, and you pointed it out. When we look to the east, you see these headline-grabbing facts and statistics where Wisconsin, some counties have a 50% infection rate. Is that the ultimate scenario the CWD task force is looking to prevent?
The culture of hunting in our communities and in our state is incredibly rich, and it's something that we really want to preserve. And central to that is a healthy, resilient deer herd. And so a population that is completely free of CWD, or a population even with a low level, 1 to 5% that maybe have this disease, that's a population that is still pretty resilient and something that we can really enjoy in the long term. Contrast that with areas that you mentioned, localized areas in Wisconsin that can have really high infection rates. Another unfortunate poster child of what you want to avoid is some localized areas in Saskatchewan where mule deer bucks, you're looking at probably 70% infection rate. That starts to have some pretty strong consequences in terms of changes in the age structure of your population. That high of an infection rate can start to cause population level declines and impacts. And overall, those things strongly begin to erode that hunting culture and tradition that we're talking about.
Sure. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Let's explore that a little more. Are we talking smaller racks? Are we talking deer that die by age 3? What are sort of the things that hunters see in that Wisconsin population or that Saskatchewan population? What are they seeing in terms of that quality of trophy buck or maybe even just a healthy doe? What's that look like?
Let's look at just a hypothetical population where 50 to 70% of bucks are infected. Honestly, if you get that high of an infection rate, you're basically looking at your population consists of deer that most have a terminal disease and the rest of them just haven't got infected yet. And so if it's such a hot level of infection, these deer hit the ground, they probably get infected shortly after hitting the ground, and basically the clock starts ticking. So 18 to 20 months after becoming infected, that's going to be a dead deer, through clinical disease or other things. You simply just don't have a population that can produce deer that are a whole lot older than maybe 2.5. There might be a 3.5 out there, but the ability for that core population to produce the deer that we all really want to target, it just is simply gone. So that's a scenario that we would really like to avoid in North Dakota.
I'm sure hunters would as well, when hunters focus on those 3, 4, 5-year-old deer. I mean, that's a big difference when all you have are 2s and 3s at the most. Wrapping up here with Charlie Bahnson, Wildlife Veterinarian for the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Charlie, another disease that again is on the pages of most newspapers right now is the breakout of EHD that we have seen again, particularly in the southern and southwestern part of North Dakota. But that dry summer we had has coincided with this EHD outbreak like we saw last summer and fall, which last fall was very notable. How is this year's EHD outbreak the same, and what are you seeing that might be a little bit different?
What's interesting this year is that we're really not seeing much overlap at all between areas affected right now and areas affected last year. And so I think it's deer that are unfortunately dying, or the deer that are affected right now were ones that kind of were not exposed and not involved last year. We're kind of almost looking at different subpopulations. Probably the strongest, most heavily hit area is actually the greater Bismarck-Mandan area. I was saying about a 20-mile radius. We're actually getting reports up to the Washburn area along the river, maybe 10 to 20 miles either side, and then out to the Menokin-McKenzie area.
Charlie, last year there were minor impacts to other species other than white-tailed deer. We had some mule deer, reports of pronghorn, and even an elk that may have died from EHD. Do you anticipate the same this year?
Last year, I kind of attribute it to the fact that there was just so much virus out there and it was so widespread that we did kind of have some other species involved. So I think it'll just be a matter of wait and see. If we get that same kind of landscape level viral activity out there, I think we can expect to see some, particularly pronghorn and mule deer, but it doesn't seem to have the same level of impact
Sure. And final question, when folks are out there on the landscape, like you said, the pheasant hunter, the grouse hunter here in the warmer months, September and maybe even October, and they see what they think is an EHD death, how do they go about reporting that to you and Game and Fish?
Great question. We just set up an online reporting system, which is working really slick for us. You can find it online on our webpage. It's gf.nd.gov/mortality-report. Jump on that form and fill in the information, and it asks for location, number of deer. We ask if you want a follow-up telephone call or not. Please do let us know. We keep tabs on this. It kind of helps us basically track where we're expecting or where we're finding mortality, where we might expect kind of localized population level impacts. And so we depend heavily on hunters for that. So definitely relay that information as it comes in.
Yeah, great to have that resource. We appreciate all you do for our populations of deer and big game throughout North Dakota. And Charlie, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So whether your bow season's underway or you're looking ahead to that firearms season in November, it's good to be aware of these issues out there and the proactive steps that are being taken to manage a disease like chronic wasting disease, which has long-term effects on hunting quality, and in the short term, knowing about what's happening with EHD, a more localized and seasonal-based disease. Keep those in mind as you hit the field, and I'll look for you in our outdoors.